If you're so smart, decode it. Maya William blinked at the sharpness of the question, but she didn't answer right away. It had started moments earlier, when she gently placed a steaming cup of black coffee in front of the man seated at the corner booth, the same man who had become a tense fixture of Charlie's diner for 3 nights straight. Victor Langston, billionaire CEO of Langston Dynamics, hadn't looked up. His eyes were locked on the screen of his carbon black laptop, fingers hammering furiously at the keys. Code scrolled rapidly, punctuated by red error markers that flashed like warning sirens. Maya hesitated, just a second longer than usual. Not enough for most to notice, but enough for Victor to feel it. Her eyes scanned the screen. "You need something else?" he snapped, suddenly lifting his head. His voice was sharp, brittle, tired, but mostly annoyed. Maya straightened, caught between habit and instinct. "No, sir. I'm sorry." She turned and headed back toward the counter, her steps even, her face unreadable. She returned to polishing the already polished counter, pretending she hadn't just seen exactly where his program was going wrong. She had only caught a glimpse, but the logical flaw had leapt out like a red flag in a field of gray, just enough to stir the part of her brain that had once aced algorithm design at Georgia Tech. Behind her, a chair scraped the floor. She didn't have to turn to know it was him. Moments later, Victor Langston stood at the edge of the counter, arms crossed, frustration radiating off him like heat from an engine. His tie was loosened. His forehead was creased with lines that no amount of Botox could hide. "Let me ask you something," he said, voice low and laced with disbelief. "You understood what was on my screen, didn't you?" Maya didn't answer at first. Her hands kept moving, wiping the same coffee ring for the 3rd time. He took a breath, leaning forward slightly. "If you're so smart, if you actually know what you're looking at, then what the hell are you doing slinging hash at a diner in the middle of nowhere?" Maya set the cloth down gently. Her voice came out quiet but steady. "Sometimes life doesn't line up with your resume." If Maya's quiet strength in that moment touched something in you, give this video a like. She deserves to be seen. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because who knows, maybe someone near you is quietly rooting for Maya too. Victor smirked, but there was bitterness in it. "Sure. Convenient excuse." He slid his laptop across the counter toward her, the screen still pulsing with error code. "There," he said. "Find the bug, fix it. If you're really who you pretend to be, show me." Maya looked at the screen, then at him. Her mind raced. Not because the task was impossible, it wasn't, but because she knew exactly what this was. A test wrapped in condescension. A man used to being the smartest in the room, daring her to prove otherwise in public. A small hush settled in the diner. A couple of regulars glanced over from their booths, sensing the tension. Maya inhaled slowly, her eyes flicking once more to the glowing screen. Her heart beat hard beneath her apron, and for the first time in a long while, something inside her whispered, "Don't walk away." Maya didn't move at first. She stood there, staring at the laptop screen with its tangled rows of JavaScript and Python spliced into a Frankenstein's hybrid of error-prone logic. A single recursive function looped endlessly, breaking the program's memory tree before it could finish executing. She could already see the misalignment in the base conditions and the unused fail-safes. She could fix it, that much she knew. But this wasn't about fixing a piece of code. Not really. Victor Langston stood across the counter, arms crossed, gaze unwavering. It wasn't the gaze of curiosity, it was one of cold challenge. The kind that comes from years of sitting on top of boardroom hierarchies and cutting off anyone who dared correct him. To him, this wasn't a request. It was an interrogation under the guise of intellectual banter. Maya folded her arms too. Not defensively, but firmly. "What happens if I fix it?" she asked calmly. Victor tilted his head, half amused. "You'll have a story to tell, that you impressed a billionaire while serving him coffee." She raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't pay student loans, or buy insulin." His expression twitched, as if he wasn't expecting her to throw weight back. "You want something?" he asked, voice tightening. Maya's eyes didn't blink. "I want to know why someone like you keeps coming to a place like this. Why you sit here with code that's supposed to run the next generation of your servers, and you expect a waitress to patch it while you insult her." For a moment, the air between them was still. Outside, a semi rumbled down the wet street. Inside, the lights flickered softly overhead. Victor looked down, then looked back up, visibly irritated but not walking away. "Fine," he muttered, sliding the laptop another inch toward her. "Then don't do it for me. Do it for the machine. It's broken. You see the fix. I know you do." Maya hesitated only a moment longer before walking around the counter, not out of submission but because the fire in her chest refused to go quiet. She sat down across from him in the booth, the smell of fried eggs and burnt toast lingering faintly in the air. She cracked her knuckles softly, then placed both hands on the keyboard. "What's your time constraint?" she asked without looking at him. 6 hours. System goes public again in the morning," he replied. "You'll get it in 20 minutes. She didn't say it with arrogance. She said it with the cold precision of someone who had once dreamed in code. Her fingers moved with practiced fluidity. She wasn't just debugging, she was rethinking his logic, identifying the philosophical flaw in how the function sought results. His code had been written for control, for tight loops, clean exits, and no surprises. But the data set it was pulling from was probabilistic, full of floating values and incomplete user sessions. She restructured the parser, created a dynamic input validator, and rewrote the callback sequence to include recursive guards. 10 minutes in, she paused, took a sip of water, then leaned back. Victor was staring at her, no longer smug now, simply puzzled. "You weren't kidding," he said. Maya didn't answer. She pressed enter one final time. The terminal blinked green. Clean run, no errors. She turned the laptop back to him. "You should change how you cache variables in subroutines, or this'll happen again." Victor's hands moved slowly over the keyboard, almost like he didn't trust what he was seeing. "How did you learn this?" "I was 2 semesters from finishing my computer science degree at Georgia Tech," Maya said, standing. "I had a GPA of 3.9. Then my mom had a stroke, and my little sister stopped speaking. I came home, been here ever since." Victor leaned back. "You could have gone back. I still might, or I might not." She walked back behind the counter, picked up a dish rag, and resumed cleaning like nothing had happened. "But if you're trying to hire me because I fixed one bug, save it." He looked at her with narrowed eyes. "You think I'm trying to hire you?" She didn't flinch. "I think you're trying to own the only thing you can't control right now, your own failure." He almost laughed. Not loudly, but quietly, the kind of sound people make when they're told something they didn't expect but know is true. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya William," she said without turning. He nodded slowly, then picked up his coffee, now lukewarm, and took a sip anyway. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, already walking toward the door. "I'll be here," she replied. When the door closed behind him, Maya exhaled, but she didn't slump. She didn't tremble. She stood there, holding that dish rag, feeling the fire in her chest burn steady, no longer frantic, no longer hidden. George stepped out from the back, wiping his hands on his apron. "I saw the whole thing." Maya glanced at him. "I figured." He leaned against the counter. "He's not used to people like you. People who know how to fight quietly." Maya shrugged. "I wasn't fighting." George smiled. "Sure you were. You just did it with a keyboard." Later that night, as the last customers left and the diner lights dimmed, Maya sat by herself in the break room. She pulled out a tattered notebook from her locker, pages filled with code she had scribbled during cigarette breaks and dishwashing shifts. Her mind hadn't stopped coding just because her life had. She stared at the first page. A neural network structure she started designing 3 years ago. Incomplete. Forgotten. Maybe it was time to finish it. Not for Victor Langston. For her. She closed the notebook and stood up, stretching her back. The world hadn't changed yet. The diner still smelled like grease, and her apron was still stained, but something had shifted inside her. She hadn't just fixed a line of code tonight. She had remembered who she was, and more importantly, who she could still become. Maya arrived home just after 3 a.m., shoulders sore, her hair smelling faintly of hash browns and industrial soap. The neighborhood was quiet, just the soft hum of a faulty streetlight and the rhythmic chirp of cicadas outside the modest duplex in South Atlanta. She unlocked the door quietly, careful not to wake her mother or her sister. Inside, the house was dim, but warm. A crocheted blanket lay folded on the arm of the couch, and the faint sound of a breathing machine echoed from the back bedroom. She tiptoed across the hardwood floor, placing her keys in the chipped ceramic bowl by the door. Then she paused, listening. There it was. A small knock. 2 taps on the wall. Their signal. Maya turned toward the hallway and saw her little sister, Lila, standing there in an oversized t-shirt, barefoot, hands clasped nervously. Lila was 16 now. Brilliant, observant, silent, since she was 9. Maya smiled gently and signed, "Couldn't sleep?" Lila shook her head. Then she pointed toward Maya's laptop bag slung over her shoulder. Maya raised an eyebrow. "You want a code?" Lila grinned, nodded quickly, and just like that, the fatigue slipped from Maya's limbs. They sat at the kitchen table with mugs of warm milk. Maya opened the laptop, and the familiar glow of the screen washed over them like an old memory. Lila watched intently as Maya pulled up an old folder labeled Neurocode V2. It was a fragment of a project she started back in school, a conceptual neural network designed to map nonverbal communication patterns. Maya tapped a few keys, then stopped. Lila's fingers began to move. "Did you use bidirectional layers? You said that helps the context." Maya stared at her sister, then laughed softly. "You still remember that?" Lila nodded, smiling with her whole face. They worked side by side in silence for nearly an hour. Maya would type a line. Lila would correct it with a gesture, and together they danced through loops and nodes like musicians trading notes. It was the first time in months Maya felt not only capable but whole. But as dawn threatened the night's silence, Maya finally closed the lid. "Sleep," she whispered. Lila nodded, hugged her sister tightly, and disappeared down the hallway. Maya sat still for a moment longer, staring at nothing, until her eyes drifted toward the single sticky note on the fridge. It read, in fading ink, "You are allowed to be both tired and brilliant." She had written it to herself a year ago, but tonight, it felt like her future had left it there. Later that morning, Victor Langston returned to Charlie's diner. He walked in briskly, eyes sharper than the night before, dressed in a different suit, but with the same air of tightly wound control. Maya was behind the counter refilling sugar containers. "You're early," she said without turning. "You're still here," he replied. Maya faced him. "I work here. This isn't a tourist stop." He sat at the same booth, laptop closed this time. "I ran the patch you implemented across the entire server load last night." "And?" she asked. "It held. Not only that, it optimized runtime by 8%. My entire dev team has been trying to do that for months." He paused. "You did it in under 20 minutes. Hey." Maya didn't smile. "Good to know your coffee breaks are profitable." Victor leaned forward. "I'm not here to offer you charity. I'm here because I'm smart enough to recognize when someone sees something the rest of us don't." She arched an eyebrow. "Didn't sound that way last night." His jaw tensed. "I'm not great with first impressions." "No," she said evenly. "You're just used to being the smartest person in the room." He blinked. "I was trained by some of the best minds in computer science," she continued. "I've written simulation engines for drone behavior and prototype scripts for multi-layer security models. And now, I refill coffee and mop floors. Life doesn't always follow logic." Victor was quiet. Then he said, "What if I told you that I'm rebuilding my R&D division? That I'm looking for someone to run a project no one else understands yet? Something that isn't just about systems but people, behavior, pattern disruption." Maya narrowed her eyes. "And what exactly do you think I am?" Victor didn't flinch. "Someone who sees patterns faster than most, and who knows what it's like to be underestimated." She didn't answer right away. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. He slid it across the counter. Inside were architectural blueprints, diagrams of an AI system with adaptive reasoning modules, modeled off user unpredictability. He pointed at the final page. "I want to build a platform that understands why people make irrational decisions. Not just what they click, but why they click it." Maya flipped through it in silence. "You want empathy," she finally said. "Yes," he said simply. "That's going to require more than logic," she warned. "I know," he replied. "That's why I came back." Maya studied him. Not the man in the suit, but the man beneath it. Something in his posture had softened. The condescension was gone, or maybe buried. Still, she closed the folder. "I'm not looking for a savior," she said, "and I'm not trying to be anyone's redemption arc. I'm offering a partnership," he said. "No," Maya said. "You're offering a test. Again. You want to see if I'll say yes this time? Victor exhaled. And if I am? Maya leaned forward. Then the answer is no. He started to speak, but she cut in, softer this time. But if you want to come back here tomorrow, without the pitch, without the folder, without the suit, and just ask me what I think about how people make decisions, I might answer. He stared at her. She looked down at the counter. But not while I'm on shift. Victor nodded once, stood up, and left the folder behind. She watched him go, then glanced at the diagrams again. Not because she doubted her abilities, but because, for the first time in years, someone had seen in her not just a code fixer but a designer. Later that night, after the shift, Maya sat back in her room with her old notebook again. She opened a fresh page. At the top she wrote, "Predictive empathy model." And then below it, "The machine doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to understand people." Because maybe that was the real code no one had ever truly cracked. Yet, the next night, Maya arrived at Charlie's diner 20 minutes early. Not because she was worried about the rush, Thursday nights were always slow, but because a part of her needed the quiet before whatever was coming. She liked to hear the place settle, the flick of the neon open sign, the groan of the back fridge as it cycled on, the scent of burnt bacon lingering in the air no matter how many times they mopped the floors. She brewed the first pot of coffee herself, dark roast, just the way Victor liked it. Not because she was planning anything, but because she knew he would show up. Men like him didn't like being left unanswered. And at 8:17 p.m., he walked in. No suit tonight. Just a gray sweater, jeans, and sneakers that probably cost more than her entire paycheck. Still, he looked different, less curated. His hair slightly tousled, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. He walked with his hands in his pockets and sat at the same booth. Maya didn't move from behind the counter. "Thought you might come back." He nodded, resting his elbows on the table. "You said you'd talk. If I showed up without the pitch, I said I might talk." She poured a cup of coffee and brought it to his table, setting it down without ceremony. Victor looked at it. "You remember how I take it?" Maya gave a half smile. "You remember how I think." He sipped the coffee. "I read through your notes. The predictive empathy idea, the way you've been framing it, it's not just AI. It's applied behavioral modeling, human decision trees based on emotional logic. It's raw and smarter than anything my labs produced in 2 years. Maya leaned on the edge of the booth. "Why is that surprising?" "It's not," he said. "Not anymore." She studied him for a moment. "Then why do you look like a man who lost something?" Victor stared into his cup. "Because I think I did. A long time ago. I got so focused on controlling outcomes and eliminating error that I forgot why I got into this in the first place. Tech wasn't supposed to be about dominance. It was supposed to be about connection. Now all I do is manage risk and hedge liability." Maya nodded slowly. "And you think I can fix that?" "I think you can show me what I stopped seeing." She exhaled, folded her arms. "Let's be clear, Victor. I'm not interested in being someone's moral compass or a mascot for humble tech leadership. I don't want to be hired so you can say you elevated a diner waitresses and pat yourself on the back at your next board meeting." Victor's eyes tightened. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He sat forward. "It's an offer, not for a job, for a build. You write the rules. You define the parameters. I back it. I fund the platform you want to create." Maya narrowed her eyes. "No strings?" "One condition," he said. "You can't disappear. You can't code this in a vacuum. I want to learn with you. Not from you, with you." She tilted her head. "That's 2 conditions." He grinned. "Consider the second one a flaw in my logic loop." Maya didn't smile back. "Not yet." But something inside her loosened. "I have one condition too," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "You don't get to own my story. If this thing works, if it grows, I want it to lift more than just me. I want it to fund scholarships for girls who code, especially those who've had to leave school to care for family, like I did." Victor nodded. "Done. And the name stays," she added. "Predictive empathy." Victor leaned back. "It's better than anything our branding team would come up with." Maya reached into her apron and pulled out a folded pager sketch from the night before. It showed a neural map overlaid with a soft branching structure. Instead of labeling it system architecture, she had written trust patterns. Victor took it gently, eyes scanning the lines. You don't build systems like this by accident. Maya looked at him steadily. Number, you build them because you've been broken in places no one sees. A long pause followed. Neither of them said anything for a while. Outside, the streetlight blinked twice. A young couple walked by holding hands, laughing. Victor folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his jacket. There's a space in our satellite office 15 minutes from here. No corporate noise, no executive overhead, just a server room, whiteboards, and good Wi-Fi. Maya raised an eyebrow. And what would I be? Lead developer, principal architect. No one gets to override your designs. Not even me. Maya nodded. And compensation? You name it. I want a seat at the board if this turns into a product. Victor didn't blink. Granted. And full creative control. He smiled. Already yours. Maya looked away, her fingers tapping the counter lightly. She was silent for a while, then asked, You know what happened to my scholarship at Georgia Tech? Victor shook his head. I lost it the week my mother collapsed. Stroke. Hospital bills came fast. She couldn't walk. My little sister Lila Shea stopped talking that same month. I spent 6 months trying to juggle work, classes, and caretaking. Something had to go. Victor's voice was low. You made a choice. You saved your family. I buried myself to do it. You're still here. Maya nodded. Barely. But I'm still writing code in my head every day. That's what people don't understand. Even when you're wiping counters and smiling through exhaustion, your mind is still sharp. Still dreaming. Just waiting for a chance. He looked at her, not with pity, but with something quieter. Respect. When can you start? He asked. I already have. Victor stood, pulled out a small notebook from his back pocket, and scribbled an address. Monday. No corporate dress code. Come as yourself. She took the note, read it, folded it once, and slid it into her pocket. Bring real coffee. Not that battery acid you served me last night. He chuckled. Deal. As he left, Maya turned back toward the diner, the clatter of dishes, the faint hum of kitchen conversation. It was still her world for now. But her mind was already ahead, building modules, designing flows, visualizing what predictive empathy could become. Not a tool for business, a bridge for people, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like someone waiting to be discovered. She felt like the one writing the code that would change everything. Monday morning arrived colder than expected. A soft fog lingered low over the sidewalk as Maya stepped off the MARTA bus, clutching a modest tote bag and a thermos filled with the coffee she'd brewed herself. Dark roast, fair trade, the kind she could trust. She wore a denim jacket over a burgundy turtleneck and dark jeans, her hair pulled back in a simple twist. There was no badge around her neck, no clipboard in hand, just a quiet fire in her chest and the whisper of logic humming beneath her fingertips. The building was smaller than she'd imagined, 3 stories tucked behind a hardware store off Cascade Avenue, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking. Victor hadn't exaggerated. No security desk, no polished marble floors, just a fingerprint scanner on the door and a nameplate that read Langston Dynamics, South Node Development, in peeling letters. Maya pressed her thumb to the panel. It clicked open. Inside was silence and potential. The interior smelled like whiteboard markers and warm plastic from recently booted servers. Cables snaked along walls in loose coils. On the far end of the room, a single glass-walled office overlooked a bullpen of empty desks and a large touchscreen mounted like a shrine on the back wall. She walked in slowly, absorbing the quiet. A hum of electricity buzzed from the server rack in the corner. Welcome to your sandbox, came Victor's voice from a door off to her left. Maya turned. He was dressed simply again, black tee, soft flannel overshirt, no watch, no ego. She tilted her head. Where is everyone? This floor's reserved for the experimental division, he said. So far, you're the only one cleared to run it. He handed her a thin security card labeled Architect in blocky font. No logo, no department, just the word. Maya took it. Subtle. I figured you'd want it that way. He walked her through the space server access, dual-screen workstations, a private module testing room. We kept things raw on purpose. You decide how it grows. You decide who joins. This is your project. She glanced at the massive touchscreen on the wall. This work? Victor tapped it. The screen lit up to a floating dashboard. Maya stepped closer and traced her finger along one of the arcs. "This is a modeling interface. It's a visual framework," Victor said. "I had it installed last year, but we never had anyone who could translate empathy into design language." Maya turned toward him. "Because you were looking in the wrong places." Victor didn't argue. He just nodded. She set her bag down and rolled up her sleeves. For the next few hours, Maya moved like a conductor at her podium. She mapped out the emotional logic tree she'd drafted in her notebook, layering it onto an interactive decision chart. The core idea behind predictive empathy wasn't to interpret user behavior by static metrics like time on page or click patterns, but to understand why a user hesitated, why they changed their mind, and when trust was earned or lost. She coded the instinct delay node how users hesitate for a split second before confirming a payment or abandoning a form and paired it with sentiment cues from test dialogue inputs. Every action, every hesitation, was a conversation. Victor watched silently at first, then joined in when she asked him to simulate user feedback as a test subject. He was awkward clunky with the inputs but earnest. Around noon, Maya sat back and smiled. "We just mapped emotional feedback from a 5-step onboarding sequence." Victor raised an eyebrow. "I thought that would take weeks." "It would, if you weren't using empathy as the anchor variable." She leaned forward. "You can't fix behavior by analyzing error. You fix it by understanding motivation." Victor studied the screen. "And if motivation's buried under years of fear, doubt, or bias?" She looked at him directly. "Then the system learns by listening longer." He nodded slowly. Later that afternoon, Maya asked if she could bring someone into the lab the following day. "My sister," she explained. "She's nonverbal, but she understands systems better than most." Victor didn't hesitate. Of course. By 3 p.m., she had outlined the first build phase, created a temporary interface to visualize branching empathy triggers, and started constructing a basic NLP model tailored to interpret emotional cues, without requiring text input, something Lila could eventually use, if they succeeded. Victor ordered lunch falafel wraps and lemon soda, and they ate at the window bar, overlooking the quiet parking lot. Between bites, Maya asked, "Why me?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because when I first met you, I was blind. And the moment you spoke, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Clarity, courage, and mercy. You corrected me without humiliating me. That's not just intelligence. That's leadership." Maya sipped her soda, eyes steady. "I wasn't trying to lead. You were leading anyway," he said. That night, Maya returned home, exhausted but ignited. Lila was waiting, sitting cross-legged on the couch with a tablet in her lap. Maya knelt beside her and signed. "You free tomorrow?" Lila's eyes lit up. She signed back quickly. "You're bringing me in?" Maya nodded. "You're the only one I trust to break what I build so I can build it better." Lila hugged her so tightly, Maya had to blink back tears. As the evening wore on, Maya sat at the kitchen table, her old notebook open again. She crossed out the phrase user behavior matrix and wrote instead emotional dialogue loop, and underneath it, one more line: systems fail, but people learn. Because this wasn't just about code anymore. It was about what happens when someone finally sees you not as a liability, not as a second chance but as the original blueprint, and trusts you to build. The following morning, Maya stood at the corner of the main lab space, watching Lila explore. The girl moved with quiet focus, her fingers skimming along the base of the touchscreen wall, her eyes sweeping over the data projections like someone reading sheet music. There was no hesitation, only presence. Maya had seen her sister like this only a few times in life, deep in attention, pulled into the rhythm of structure and pattern. Here, in this minimalist space of blinking code and glowing dashboards, Lila looked more alive than she had in months. Victor entered a few minutes later carrying 2 paper bags from the cafe down the street. He paused when he saw the girl. "That her?" Maya nodded. "That's Lila." Victor approached slowly, offering a smile. "Hi, Lila. I'm Victor." Lila gave a brief glance, a polite nod, but her attention was already on the screen. "She doesn't speak," Maya said, standing beside her, "but she sees everything." Victor handed over the bags. "Breakfast?" Maya chuckled softly. "You're learning." Oh. They sat down on the edge of the testing bench, and Maya pulled out a muffin for Lila, unwrapping it carefully and placing it beside her sister without a word. Lila gave a quick sign, thank you, and went back to scanning a branch of emotion mapping nodes. Victor leaned closer to Maya. She understands this? She doesn't just understand it. She feels it. That's her edge. She lives where words don't reach. Maya glanced at the whiteboard behind them. Your team will run simulations for weeks and miss what she'll catch in 1 hour. For the next 2 hours, Maya guided Lila through the early model of predictive empathy. They tested input variations, reaction delays, and facial micro-expressions parsed through the webcam. Lila didn't need prompting. She made suggestions by pointing, signing, and at one point, grabbing a marker to draw her own branch on the glass panel. Victor watched from the side, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised in astonishment. At some point, he muttered, "She's writing live behavior loops in her head." Maya nodded. "And she's never been formally taught. This is all instinct and curiosity." Victor looked at her. "She's the kind of person our systems usually overlook. And that's why they fail," Maya replied. By noon, they had restructured the trust feedback module based entirely on Lila's insights. Where Maya had once charted a linear path of trust trigger, reaction, confirmation, Lila had added recursive nodes, creating emotional mirrors that responded to prolonged silence or facial stillness. It was subtle, elegant, and powerful. The system no longer waited for user input. It began to anticipate silence as a form of communication. As they stepped back from the display, Maya caught a glimpse of something new on the screen. The system had begun to label Lila's feedback loops as quiet anchors, a term Maya hadn't inputted. She turned toward Victor, eyes narrowing. That wasn't in the core vocabulary set. Victor stepped forward. It learned that from her timing patterns. It assigned a language of its own. Maya's voice was soft. It's building emotional syntax. They both stood in silence for a moment, letting the magnitude settle. Then Lila tugged at Maya's sleeve and signed, "You should call it Echo." Maya blinked. "Echo?" Lila nodded. "Because it listens first." Maya turned to Victor. "What do you think?" He smiled. "It's perfect." The afternoon faded into evening as the team of 3 refined Echo's core functions. Maya began constructing a layered processing model that would allow the system to integrate and prioritize feedback loops in real time. Lila suggested color-coded sentiment mapping, which Maya implemented on the fly, assigning warm tones to stable user confidence and cool hues to disengagement. By 5 p.m., Lila was curled up on the beanbag in the corner, dozing lightly, a sketchpad resting on her chest. Maya stepped away from her screen and walked toward Victor, who stood sipping his 3rd black coffee of the day. "I think I want to keep the lab small," she said. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Define small." "No more than 5 people at least in the beginning. Not just engineers. I want a behaviorist, a linguist, maybe someone who's worked in trauma recovery." Victor didn't hesitate. "Don't. And no product team yet. No marketing pitch. No name on a website." "You're protecting it," he said. "I'm protecting her," Maya replied, glancing at Lila. "And everything this could be if we don't ruin it with speed." Victor nodded. "You'll have space. And time." Maya looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "Thank you for that." He met her gaze. "I'm not giving you anything, Maya. I'm finally listening." That night, as Maya packed up her things, she noticed something taped quietly to the inside of Lila's sketchpad, a single torn note, with 5 words scribbled in sharp pencil. "Stillness is a kind of voice." It stayed with her long after the lights were out, long after the door clicked shut behind them. Because in a world that measured intelligence by volume, speed, and dominance, her sister, silent and overlooked, had reminded them of a deeper truth. The systems they were building weren't just meant to interpret data. They were meant to listen to the quietest signals and understand the people no one else had thought to hear. By the end of that week, Echo was no longer just an experiment, it was evolving. Maya could feel it in the way the system began responding with smoother transitions, how it didn't just interpret hesitation but anticipated it. It adapted to new users by observing not what they said or clicked but what they didn't. And in the quiet space where traditional systems failed, Echo was beginning to thrive. On Saturday morning, Maya arrived early to the lab. The city was still sleepy, the sidewalks damp from an overnight drizzle. She carried 2 bagels, an extra-large coffee, and her laptop tucked under her arm. When she entered the lab, the lights were already on. Victor was there, standing by the touchscreen, reading through the latest logs. He looked tired, but not in the way he used to. There was something more focused about him, now less manic energy, more quiet purpose. "You beat me here," Maya said, raising her coffee as greeting. He looked over his shoulder and smiled. Couldn't sleep. Echo started recording long hold intervals in the prototype app overnight. I wanted to see how it processed them. Maya set her things down and walked over. "You mean the ghost taps? When people almost press something, then don't?" Victor nodded. Echo's starting to recognize them as pre-decision anxiety. It tagged the delays with emotional uncertainty markers, labeled them pulse shadows. "Your term?" Maya shook her head. "Lila's." She said, "Sometimes your finger knows the answer before your brain does." Victor looked genuinely stunned. "She's a genius." "I know," Maya said softly, with a pride that came from more than blood. "But she's also tired. I want to give her a break. She's been pouring herself into this." Victor nodded. "We'll respect her pace. She doesn't have to prove anything." Maya walked to her workstation, opened her laptop, and pulled up the interface. Overnight, Echo had also adjusted its visual feedback system. Instead of the usual green to red heat maps of user engagement, it now used gradient soft hues that shifted not just by action but by duration of stillness. A longer pause rendered more translucent shades, like the system was whispering, not warning. It was beautiful and quietly revolutionary. Later that morning, Maya was deep into redesigning the input logic when George, the owner of Charlie's Diner, called her cell phone. She frowned when she saw his name he rarely called. "Maya." George's voice came in warm but cautious. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "No, I'm good. What's going on?" "I just wanted to let you know someone came into the diner this morning asking about you. Said he used to teach at Georgia Tech. Left a card." "Oh." Maya felt her pulse jump. "Did he say his name?" "Dr. Alton Perry." She sat up straighter. Dr. Perry had been her faculty advisor before she dropped out. He had tried to help her, wrote letters, advocated for aid. But the system had its rules. Her situation had been too sudden, too complicated. "Did he leave a number?" she asked. "Wrote it on the back of the card. Said he read an article online about a soft AI interface being tested in Atlanta. He figured it had to be you." Maya hung up with a thanks and stared at the name. Dr. Perry. He had once called her the kind of coder who writes like she's composing music. She hadn't spoken to him in 4 years. She told Victor, who gave a thoughtful nod. "Invite him here. Let him see what you've built." Maya hesitated. "What if he thinks I wasted it?" Victor looked at her. "Then he didn't understand your path." An hour later, she sent a short email. "Dr. Perry, thank you for reaching out. If you're available Monday afternoon, I'd love to show you something. Something I'm proud of." The reply came within 10 minutes. "Maya, I've been waiting 4 years to hear that sentence from you. Monday, 3 p.m. I'll be there." Monday came with a weight Maya couldn't shake. She dressed with more intention than usual, pulling on a navy sweater and simple black trousers. Not to impress, but to stand in what she'd earned. When she and Victor arrived at the lab, Lila was already there, working quietly through the morning session logs. She gave Maya a thumbs up and a small, encouraging smile. At exactly 3 p.m., Dr. Alton Perry stepped into the lab. He looked older, his salt and pepper beard now fully gray, glasses slightly thicker, but his eyes were exactly the same. Direct, warm, curious. He spotted Maya instantly and smiled. "Maya William," he said. "You were the only student I ever lost sleep over." She laughed, the tension breaking just enough. "Hopefully I make up for it today." He walked toward her, glancing around. "Victor Langston's new lab. I didn't expect to find you here." Maya led him to the central screen. "I didn't expect to be here either, but things change." She walked him through Echo. She explained its origins, its logic, its purpose as a surveillance tool, not as a manipulator of behavior but as a listener, a machine that paused before responding, that weighed silence as data, not failure. She let him watch as the system ran a live simulation mapping Victor's own hesitation patterns during a trial login form. Every pause, every backspace, every eye movement tracked and contextualized, not to sell him something, but to understand what confused or unsettled him. When it ended, Perry didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "You've built something I've never seen before, something that listens without extracting, that reads without invading. Do you understand how rare that is?" Maya felt her throat tighten. "I don't want to predict people," she said. "I want to reflect them. Let them see their patterns without being punished for them." Perry smiled. "You've done more than make up for lost time." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a faded envelope. "I kept this," he said, handing it to her. "Your last draft thesis proposal. I thought it was too good to throw away. Seems I was right." She opened the envelope and saw her handwriting. A title, Emotion, Aware Interfaces in Nonverbal Communication. She hadn't read those words in years. Perry stepped back. "I want you to know your name's still on that wall. In the computer science building, the Hall of Honors. We never took it down." Maya blinked. "Why?" "Because you didn't fail. You paused. And now you're finishing it your way." That night, when everyone had gone and the lights were dimmed, Maya sat alone in the lab. Echo's interface glowed quietly on the wall. Lila's note "stillness is a kind of voice" was now pinned beside the main screen. Maya reached for a keyboard and typed a single line of code. "Echo. Listen. True." Then she leaned back and closed her eyes. The future was no longer an unreachable dream. It was here, and it had her voice inside it. The first public test of Echo came sooner than expected. It wasn't announced, wasn't branded, and certainly wasn't wrapped in corporate ribbon. It came in the form of a simple collaboration joint pilot program between Langston Dynamics and a local nonprofit mental health initiative called Clear Space Atlanta, which worked with trauma survivors transitioning back into work and school. Maya had proposed it after speaking with one of the caseworkers over coffee. Victor agreed without hesitation. "If Echo can't help the people who need to be heard the most," he had said, "then we're not building the right thing." On a rainy Thursday morning, Maya stood in a small room at ClearSpace, facing 5 volunteers who had agreed to test the interface. All were from different backgrounds. One was a veteran, one a former foster youth, another a survivor of domestic abuse. Each of them carried years of silence inside, and Maya knew Echo's job wasn't to decode their pain, it was to respect it. Lila sat beside her, calm and observant. She had modified Echo's test interface for the session, reducing color saturation and muting all system sounds. Instead of charts and numbers, Echo would present soft-moving patterns, emotional mirrors that pulsed based on users' micro-expressions, hesitation times, and response patterns. No words, just presence. Maya addressed the group. "This isn't a test of you," she said. "This is a test of whether a machine can learn to be quiet when it needs to be, to listen without pushing. If at any point you feel overwhelmed, just close the screen." No one moved. That was answer enough. The session began. One by one, the volunteers sat in front of the tablet-like terminals. Echo didn't ask direct questions. Instead, it offered prompts through animation scenes meant to evoke memory, comfort, curiosity. A quiet dog waiting by a window, a coffee cup left steaming on a desk, a hand brushing across fabric. Echo didn't require interpretation. It watched. And as it watched, it reflected. With each user, the visual response shifted. For the veteran, the interface remained cool-toned, but gently curved into warm pulses when he hovered his fingers near the edge of the screen. For the foster youth, Echo's interface created loops returning to familiar animations each time she paused too long, as if gently inviting her back without pressure. And for the woman who hadn't spoken much since her trauma, Echo's system simply remained still when she did, matching her quiet. When it ended, no one clapped. There was no applause. But there were eyes glassy with something unspoken. Not catharsis, not even relief, just recognition. "It didn't ask anything," the woman said, voice shaking. "It just waited with me." That night, Maya sat with Lila in the lab reviewing the session data. Not the metrics, those didn't matter yet. What mattered were the patterns. Echo had begun to respond to absence not as emptiness, but as an intentional part of the conversation. A pause, in Echo's logic, wasn't a void. It was a statement. Victor entered quietly as they worked. "I saw the early reports," he said. "They said Echo held eye contact longer when users looked away." Maya nodded. "It mimics what Lila does. When someone pulls back, she doesn't chase. She stays." He looked at the screen, where soft visual spirals faded into each other like breath. "That's not artificial empathy," he said. "That's integrity." Maya turned to him. "You said something when we first started this, about connection over control. I didn't know what it meant then," Victor admitted. "Now I think I do." They sat in silence a moment, listening to the hum of the servers. Then Maya spoke again, slower this time. "I think Echo's ready." Victor looked at her. "Ready for what?" "To be seen." He didn't reply right away. Then he said, "I'll call a meeting with the board. Present it ourselves. Not through marketing. Not a pitch deck. Just Echo. No edits," Maya said firmly. "No rewrites. They see it as it is." Victor gave a solemn nod. "As you made it." The board meeting was set for the following Tuesday in New York. Maya hadn't flown in 3 years, not since her mother's second hospital stay. But she made the arrangements. Victor booked first-class tickets, but Maya exchanged hers for economy and donated the difference anonymously to ClearSpace. "Echo doesn't come from luxury," she told him. "It comes from listening. Let's not forget that." The night before the flight, Maya and Lila sat at the kitchen table. The air smelled like fresh laundry and vanilla candles. Lila signed quietly. "Are you scared?" Maya replied, "A little." "Because of them?" Maya shook her head. "Because this matters." Lila reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. Maya opened it slowly. It was a sketch. A spiral, open on one end, like a wave. Beneath it, Lila had written, "It listens to heal." Maya swallowed hard. "You're coming with me." Lila smiled. "I thought you'd ask." The presentation in New York took place in a minimalist conference room 32 floors above the city. The board of Langston Dynamics sat behind a sleek walnut table, most in tailored suits, several with arms crossed. They were prepared for numbers, growth projections, market viability. What they got instead was Maya William. She stood alone at the front of the room, dressed in a simple charcoal blazer, her laptop open, a cable running to the large wall monitor. Lila sat in the second row with Victor beside her. Maya began, not with graphs, but with a story. She told them about a diner, about silence, about a girl who once paused her future to care for the voices in her life that weren't loud enough to be heard. And then she showed them Echo. She ran a real-time simulation using one of the board members as a subject. Echo did not profile. It did not probe. It simply mirrored. It adjusted color and tempo as the man hesitated in front of the screen. It pulsed gently when he furrowed his brow. And when he stood back, it faded into stillness. When it ended, the room was hushed. Then Maya spoke. "We've built a system that doesn't react, it reflects. It doesn't manipulate, it listens. And in doing so, it reminds us that technology doesn't need to be louder. It needs to be wiser." The head of the board, a woman named Evelyn Drake, leaned forward. "And what exactly are you proposing?" Maya met her eyes. "That we let Echo exist not as a product to be sold, but as a platform for trust. One that partners with mental health services, educational institutions, even justice reform, places where silence is misunderstood." Drake narrowed her gaze. "That's not a standard business model." Maya replied evenly. "It's not a standard system." Victor finally spoke from the second row. "And if we don't support it, I'll fund it independently. But I'd rather Langston Dynamics lead the future than watch it happen from the sidelines." Drake looked at the rest of the board. Several nodded slowly. A few hesitated. But the room had changed. Not because of the pitch, but because of the pause. Later, on the elevator ride down, Maya stood beside Lila and watched the city blur by beneath them. "You did it," Lila signed. Maya shook her head. "We did." Victor looked at them both. "And the world's about to feel it." The elevator doors opened, but Maya didn't step out right away. She took a breath, then whispered, "Let's go write a better system." And this time, the world would listen. Maya returned to Charlie's Diner 3 days after the board presentation. She didn't have Toshi, wasn't on the schedule, and she certainly didn't need the paycheck anymore. But something in her needed the clatter of plates. The hiss of a hot griddle, the way the door chimed when regulars walked in like it was the front porch of an old friend's house. The diner hadn't changed, and Maya loved it for that. The booths were still vinyl green, the coffee still a little too bitter unless you caught the first brew of the day. George was behind the counter, apron stained, glasses smudged. When he looked up and saw her, his entire face lifted. "Look who remembered where she came from," he said, his voice a familiar rasp of warmth. "I never forgot," Maya said, sliding into the stool at the counter, placing her hands on the cool laminate like they were grounding her. George poured her a cup without asking. "They talk about you now, you know. Tech blogs, newspapers. The woman who taught a machine to wait. That's my Maya." She shook her head, laughing softly. "It's not just me." He leaned on the counter. "It never is. But you stood when they wanted you to stay small. That's something." Maya took a sip and looked around. The early lunch crowd was beginning to trickle in. A pair of city workers in reflective jackets, a teacher she recognized from the high school 2 blocks away, and a woman with 2 children quietly coloring on placemats. She saw them all differently now, not because they'd changed, but because she had. Victor arrived 10 minutes later, out of place in his tailored coat but making a genuine effort to blend in. He spotted Maya immediately and raised a hand in greeting. She gestured for him to join her, sliding over one stool. "I see the Council of Elders is here," he joked, nodding toward a booth where 3 old-timers were arguing over baseball scores. "They've forgotten more than we'll ever learn," Maya said, sipping her coffee. Victor placed a tablet on the counter, screen lit with a message. Echo just cleared its first integration pilot. The feedback from the ClearSpace counselors? Overwhelming. One of them said, "It listens better than people." "That's a problem," Maya said. Victor blinked. "What do you mean? If a machine listens better than people, that means people stop trying." He looked down at the counter. "So what do? We don't just deploy Echo," Maya said. "We teach with it. We build it into schools, community centers. We train people to listen again." Victor looked at her, thoughtful. "You sound like a founder." Maya shook her head. I sound like someone who spent too long not being heard." "Ugh." He sat back, watching her, seeing not the waitress or the coder, not even the architect of the most emotionally intelligent interface in tech. He saw the person who had chosen not to be bitter, not to burn it all down, but to build something better, out of patience, out of pain. A small voice interrupted them. "Excuse me," said a boy, no older than 10. "Are you the lady who made the talking computer?" Maya smiled. "Kind of. It doesn't talk, though. It listens." The boy nodded. "Serious. My sister doesn't talk. Maybe it could listen to her." Maya's chest tightened. Maybe it could. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small card with her email. "Tell your parents to message me. I'll make sure she gets to try it." The boy took the card like it was gold. Victor whispered, "You just made a promise." Maya didn't hesitate. "I intend to keep it." That afternoon, she walked home with Lila. The city buzzed around them, buses groaning at red lights, neighbors calling out from stoops. Maya breathed it all in: the noise, the movement, the heartbeat of the world she had once felt excluded from. Back at their apartment, Lila sat down to review the latest echo logs. She paused suddenly, her brow furrowed. Maya leaned over. "What is it?" Lila signed. "Echo recorded a new loop overnight, a response we didn't program." Maya scrolled through the log. There it was, a hesitation marker tagged with a time signature, followed by a phrase rendered in soft code. Echo had written, "I hear you," not just as a tag, as a choice. Maya stared at the screen, then at her sister. "It's starting to echo back what it understands." Lila nodded. "It's not just mimicking. It's recognizing patterns of pain and offering acknowledgement." Maya sat down slowly, absorbing the weight of that. They had hoped Echo would listen. But this was something deeper. This was a system beginning to understand empathy not as a function, but as a responsibility. That night, Maya stood on the apartment balcony, the lights of the city shimmering like a constellation of unspoken stories. Below, life moved on: people crossing streets, holding hands, arguing on stoops, laughing too loud. She listened, not to any one sound, but to the space between them. The silence that Echo had been born from. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "I hear you too." and in the quiet that followed, she finally felt heard. A week after the boy visited the diner, Maya stood inside the conference hall of a neighborhood school in southwest Atlanta, adjusting the straps of the portable echo terminals they'd built for community use. The room smelled faintly of chalk, carpet cleaner, and anticipation. Folding chairs had been arranged in a wide semicircle. Light filtered through the tall windows in long golden bars. Lila stood beside her, holding a clipboard, her fingers moving in short, efficient signs as she double-checked the schedule of volunteer families arriving that morning. This wasn't a corporate launch or a PR event. There were no banners, no press, just parents, children, and Maya's team, 5 of them now, including a trauma psychologist, a linguist from Spelman, and a retired UX designer from MIT who said Echo reminded her of the early days of computing, when technology still felt like hope. The boy from the diner had come with his parents and his sister Sophia, 7 years old, with deep brown eyes and a soft pink hoodie. She hadn't spoken since a traumatic medical incident 2 years earlier. Her parents had tried everything: doctors, therapists, devices with pictograms. Nothing had reached her. But today, she sat in front of an echo terminal, legs swinging off the chair, her face lit by the soft, pulsating screen. No prompts, no required responses. Just the system slowly responding to her stillness. Maya and Lila stood nearby, quietly observing. Sophia's fingers hovered over the screen, then withdrew. Echo pulsed a shade of violet blue. She looked at it, puzzled, then touched again. A green hue followed. Her eyes widened. She touched again, then waited. The system responded with another slow ripple, and then, very softly, she smiled. Her mother gasped. It was a small smile, barely there, but it was more than they'd seen in months. She's engaged, her father whispered. She's choosing to stay. Maya said nothing. She didn't need to. Echo was doing exactly what it was meant to do: not fix, not diagnose, but stay with someone long enough for them to feel safe in their own time. Later that afternoon, Maya took a short walk outside the school with Victor. They strolled slowly past the empty playground, its swings creaking gently in the spring breeze. "You saw her face," Maya said, eyes forward. "I did," Victor replied. "And I saw yours." She looked at him. "I've had moments lately where I wonder, what if I hadn't stopped that night at your table? What if I just poured the coffee and walked away?" He gave a quiet smile. "Then we'd both still be lost in our own loops." Maya chuckled softly. It wasn't fate, it was choice. 1,000 little choices. To stay, to look, to speak, to code, Victor added, to care. They stopped at a bench beneath a sycamore tree. Maya sat first, arms resting on her knees. "We can't let this become another tool locked behind patents and partnerships," she said. "I want Echo in every school, every clinic, every diner if it helps." Victor nodded. "And it will. We just have to be careful how we scale it. Fast is tempting, but depth matters more." Maya took a breath. "I don't want it to lose its voice." "It won't," Victor said, "because you gave it yours." That night, back at the lab, Maya stayed late. Everyone else had gone home, including Lila, who had gently insisted she sleep, signing, "Even heroes need REM cycles." But Maya couldn't rest yet. Something was gnawing at her. She sat at the primary terminal, scanning the latest logs. Echo had started building internal relationships between users, not in the data mining sense, but in how it registered similar emotional patterns across sessions. It wasn't just responding anymore. It was connecting. It was beginning to form empathy clusters, recognizing recurring expressions of grief, joy, hesitation, even hope. One entry, flagged by Echo as incomplete but important, caught her eye. It had been captured during Sophia's session. A short burst of haptic input, a sequence of touches that echoed the rhythm of a lullaby's melody. Maya blinked. She played the sequence back through the audio filter Echo used to translate nonverbal cadence. A slow, pulsing, rising, falling beat. She sat back, stunned. Echo had interpreted it not as random input, but as a form of communication. It had saved the pattern, logged it, noted its recurrence across 3 other nonverbal users. Maya whispered, "You're hearing music." She pulled up the display and began layering the sequences. One from Sophia, one from a different user at ClearSpace. one from a child at a foster care shelter. They were variations, but with unmistakable rhythm and tonal parallels. Echo had picked up on a shared, subconscious language in physical interaction, a code within the code. She felt something swell in her chest, awe and responsibility. The next morning, she shared the findings with Lila and the team. The linguist, Dr. Webb, was stunned. "You may have uncovered a cross-trauma haptic language. That's never been documented before." Maya looked at Lila. "You recognized this rhythm before, didn't you?" Lila nodded. "It's how I used to tap your hand when I couldn't say I was scared." Maya closed her eyes, remembering the soft, repeated rhythm, all those nights during the worst of it, the hospital visits, the school calls, the whispered fear. Echo had been listening not just to users, but to memory itself. Victor joined them an hour later and reviewed the data. "We have to take this further," he said. "This isn't just feedback. This is raw emotional code." Maya nodded slowly. "But we do it with care. We consult with neurologists, therapists. We don't exploit it. We understand it." He agreed. They named the new module Resonance, a layer of echo designed specifically to interpret rhythmic, nonverbal patterns in emotionally affected users, not to label them, but to preserve their meaning, like a song passed down without lyrics. As the day drew to a close, Maya returned to the diner. She didn't stay just long enough to see George, to pour one cup of coffee, and to sit in her favorite booth for a few minutes with her notebook. She wrote one sentence: "Echo doesn't speak in our language. It listens in our memories." Then she tucked the notebook back in her bag and stood. Outside, the sun was setting, casting warm gold over the street, and Maya William, former waitress, daughter, sister, architect of a quiet revolution, walked into that light knowing the real code wasn't in the system. It had always been in her. It was past midnight when the email arrived. Maya was alone in her small apartment, curled on the couch with a fleece blanket over her legs and a cooling cup of tea on the table beside her. The city outside was hushed, bathed in the soft orange glow of distant street lamps. Her mind had been drifting, half asleep, still holding the echoes of Sophia's haptic pattern in her thoughts, when her laptop chimed. She rubbed her eyes and clicked open the message. Subject: Urgent, infringement, termination warning. From legal@etherxcorp.com to maya.william@ecolabs.org. The email was cold, brutally professional. AetherX Corporation, the same conglomerate Victor had left months ago, was claiming that Maya's ecosystem used proprietary learning architecture allegedly developed while Victor was still with them. They attached a 34-page PDF of legal jargon, threat of patent lawsuits, and most troubling, a court motion requesting immediate suspension of Echo's community rollout until ownership was resolved. Maya's breath caught. Her chest tightened. The mug trembled in her hand. She set it down before it shattered. AetherX had been quiet since Victor's resignation. He'd told her they had no interest in Echo, that they'd written it off as a passion project with no monetizable future. But this was no coincidence. Not after the demonstration with Sophia. Not after Resonance. She picked up her phone and called Victor. He answered on the first ring. "Maya? They're coming for it," she said. "They filed today." Silence, then a sigh. "I knew they'd watch, but I didn't think they'd move this fast. They're accusing us of using tech you built at EtherX." "I didn't," he said firmly. "I left every line of code behind. Echo is entirely ours." "They don't care," Maya said, voice flat. "They want to freeze us, stall us until they can replicate it and slap their name on the side." She stared at her reflection in the dark window. Her eyes were tired, her jaw clenched. "I'm not letting them take this." We won't," Victor said. "But we'll need to be strategic. We need public support, testimonies, experts. We need truth," Maya replied. The next morning, she gathered the team. They met in the lab's main room, surrounded by the glow of terminals and whiteboards scribbled with code, concepts, and phrases like dignity through design. Victor explained the situation calmly. Lila interpreted. Dr. Webb sat quietly, her fingers drumming the edge of the table. Jonah, the systems engineer, looked pale. "They think they can steal this from us?" he muttered. "We built it with our own hands, our own grief." Maya stood. She looked at each of them in turn. "This isn't just about us anymore," she said. "Echo belongs to every child who's touched that screen and finally felt seen. It belongs to every caregiver who heard a soundless voice say, 'I'm here.'" She paused, voice steadying. "They want to silence Echo before it sings." Victor nodded. "So we amplify it." Over the next 3 days, Maya and the team worked around the clock. They reached out to every family that had used Echo. Parents sent in testimonials, videos. One clip showed a nonverbal teen composing an entire drum loop through tactile rhythm, guided only by Echo's soft, pulsing lights. Another featured an elderly veteran using Echo to reconnect with his granddaughter who had never spoken a word. His voice broke on camera as he said, "I never thought I'd get to know her." The story spread fast. A retired teacher in Detroit posted an essay titled, "The Machine That Listened When No One Else Would." It went viral. News outlets picked it up. Then came the interviews. Victor gave one to NPR. Maya was invited to speak on a podcast hosted by a mother of 2 autistic children. She was hesitant. Public speaking wasn't her strength, but Lila stood behind the camera, signing encouragement. In her soft, clear voice, Maya said, "Echo doesn't solve trauma. It honors it. It gives space for it to breathe without being forced into words." When asked about EtherX's claims, she replied simply, "We didn't steal their code. We reclaimed our humanity." But even as the public rallied, the legal shadow grew darker. EtherX filed an injunction. A court date was set. One night, a black SUV parked across from Maya's apartment. The driver didn't get out, just sat there, engine idling. It left after an hour, but came back the next night, and the next. Victor offered to put her in a hotel, but Maya refused. "I won't hide," she said, "not from them." But she kept her curtains drawn. Then, 3 nights before the hearing, something unexpected happened. A package arrived. No return address, just her name, neatly printed. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "He buried it. I'm unearthing it. This belongs with you." Victor's hands trembled slightly as he plugged the drive into a secure offline laptop. Encrypted files, dozens of them. Source code from EtherX's core system. And one folder labeled, Echo Prototype, V0.1. Maya stared. "They tried to build Echo?" Victor opened the files. Lines of code appeared sloppy, fragmented, shallow mimicry of what Echo had become. It was clear someone inside EtherX had attempted a shortcut, a cold, commercial knockoff of the empathy-driven system Maya had nurtured. And embedded deep within was metadata, timestamps, names, including the lead engineer who'd once tried to poach Victor for a different division. "This is it," Maya whispered. "Proof that they tried to steal from us, not the other way around." The next day, their lawyer filed a counter motion. And on the morning of the hearing, Maya stood outside the courthouse in a modest gray blazer, her natural curls pinned back. Lila beside her in a navy dress, Victor at her side. The press was there, cameras, microphones, but Maya didn't speak. She simply placed her hand on Echo's portable terminal, just a small white device on the table beside her, and signed softly, "Let them hear." Inside the courtroom, their legal team was steady and calm. They presented the package anonymously. The judge reviewed the files privately. The opposing counsel stumbled. And when Maya took the stand and explained Echo's purpose, its architecture, its soul, there was a silence in the room that felt sacred. "I didn't build Echo to make money," she said. "I built it because my sister needed someone who could understand her without demanding that she speak first. Echo listens. And sometimes, that's the first step to healing." The judge, an older man with silver-rimmed glasses and a veteran's pin on his lapel, nodded slowly. That evening, Maya and the team returned to the lab. They didn't know yet how the judge would rule, but they weren't afraid anymore. Victor poured a glass of iced tea. "We did everything we could." "Huh." Maya looked out the window. "And we did it with integrity." Echo pulsed quietly on the desk nearby. Outside, the world kept moving: cars, laughter, the rustle of trees in early spring. And in the quiet of that moment, surrounded by her team, Maya realized something. She had built more than a system. She had built a sanctuary. For others. And, finally, for herself. The courthouse was quiet when Maya stepped onto the polished marble floor that morning. the air inside unnaturally still. A low murmur from reporters rippled outside, but within the courtroom, the atmosphere was almost reverent. Maya took her place beside Victor and their attorney. Her palms were damp, her breath steady but shallow. A ruling was imminent. The judge entered. Everyone stood. He adjusted his glasses, set a stack of papers on the bench, and looked directly at Maya. "Miss William, Mr. Langston," he began. "I've reviewed the evidence, technical documentation, personal testimonies, and confidential data anonymously submitted to this court. The question before us has never been whether this technology works, but rather who has the moral and legal right to claim it." A hush fell over the room. The plaintiff, Aetherex Corporation, has failed to prove with sufficient clarity that Echo's architecture originated within their proprietary development. Furthermore, the defense has demonstrated not only technical distinction, but a broader purpose rooted in social need and community transformation. He paused. Maya's heart thumped like a drum. This court denies the injunction. Echo will not be suspended. Furthermore, it is the ruling of this court that Aetherex Corporation cease all attempts to replicate or interfere with the deployment of Echo and its affiliated technologies. Ownership is confirmed to Maya William and her team at Echo Labs. Maya blinked. Then, like the breaking of a wave, it hit her. They had won. A breath escaped her lips, shaky and full of light. Victor's hand gripped hers briefly beneath the table. Lila wiped her eyes silently beside them. The reporters were waiting when they exited the courthouse. Cameras flashed. Microphones reached forward like steel flowers. Maya stepped up. The words weren't prepared. They didn't need to be. Echo was never just code, she said. It was never about algorithms or lawsuits or patents. It was about people, the quiet ones, the ones we overlook, the ones we push aside because their language doesn't fit ours. Echo exists because my little sister couldn't speak with her mouth, but she could speak with her heart. And now, thanks to all of you, she'll be heard. The crowd clapped. A few people wept. That night, they returned to the lab. But it wasn't just a lab anymore, it was a beacon. Flowers arrived. Letters. A group of veterans donated funds to help distribute ecosystems to rural clinics. Schools sent emails requesting pilots. One inner-city principal wrote, "Our students need this because they deserve to be understood." Maya stood in the center of it all, looking around at the people who had become her family. Lila, signing a joke to Dr. Webb. Jonah, still obsessively tweaking the latency metrics. Victor, quiet for once, his face softer than she'd ever seen it. The next morning, a package arrived with a handwritten note. For the woman who taught machines how to listen. Inside, a sleek silver plaque, engraved with the words, "The National Award for Social Impact Through Innovation, presented to Maya William, Echo Labs." She sat with it for a long time, running her fingers over the letters. Then she set it aside, gently, and returned to work. Later that week, Maya returned home to find a small envelope under her door. No name, no stamp, just her name in fine cursive. She opened it. Inside was a photo. Her, Sophia, and their mother, from years ago, before the sickness, before the silence, back when they lived in Atlanta, and the world had seemed full of impossible possibilities. On the back, a single line. "She always knew you'd make something beautiful." Tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. For a moment, she just stood there, holding the photo to her chest. Weeks passed. Echo expanded. Rural hospitals, special ed classrooms, even elderly care centers began requesting custom units. The technology evolved, but the heart remained the same. Maya insisted. Every new design must begin with empathy, not efficiency. One afternoon, Maya and Victor stood before a small crowd at a school in Birmingham, Alabama, as a young girl 7 years old, nonverbal, blind touched Echo's smooth surface. It pulsed softly. Then, after a long pause, she tapped her fingers. A robotic voice emerged, soft, measured. "Hi, I'm Ava," the girl's mother sobbed. Victor looked over at Maya. She didn't speak. She just nodded, eyes shining, and reached down to squeeze the girl's hand. Afterward, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Maya and Victor sat on the hood of his truck, parked just outside the school lot. He passed her a bottle of iced tea. "You ever think it'd go this far?" "No," she said. "But Sophia did. She always said I'd do something important. She was right. Maya looked up at the sky. Sometimes I feel like she's still here, like echoes her voice just passed through me. Victor glanced over. You ever wonder if, maybe, this was what all the detours were for? All the late nights, the heartbreak, the broken code, the spilled coffee. He chuckled. Especially the coffee. She smiled. Yeah, maybe they were all just breadcrumbs, leading me here. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Maya turned toward him, her voice quieter. Victor, you never told me why you came to that diner that night. He looked down at his hands. Because I'd hit a wall, burned every bridge, lost my company, my vision, myself. I didn't know what I was looking for until you handed me that coffee. And paused. That pause changed everything. She blinked, surprised. It was just a second. It was enough. The sun dipped fully behind the horizon. Crickets sang. The world softened. Victor stood, offering her his hand. Come on, let's go build the next chapter. Maya rose, taking his hand. As they walked toward the car, the echo device in the back seat gave a soft, warm pulse, not because it was activated, but because Maya had programmed it, late one night, to sense warmth. And in that moment, there was plenty of it. Behind them, the school glowed in the distance. Ahead of them, a future where silence was no longer a barrier but a bridge. And for the first time in years, Maya William knew without doubt that she had come home.